All right, we are live on Facebook and we are live on YouTube.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Michaela Wren. I'm a natural resource conservationist with Wake County Soil and Water Conservation District. This is the last presentation of our summer Lunch and Learn series on urban and suburban stormwater issues. Today's lecture is titled Help, I Need Funding for My Project. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I will be your speaker for today, but I also have my coworker Abby Haselton joining me to help with Q&A. The presentation today will focus on explaining the Community Conservation Assistance Program, also known as CCAP. If you have any questions or comments during the presentation, please type them in the comment or chat box, whether you're viewing from Facebook or YouTube, and they will be addressed afterwards during Q&A. This is a brief outline of the topics I'll be covering. First, I'll explain who the Wake Soil and Water Conservation District is, review the program details for CCAP. I'll discuss the type of BMPs or best management practices that are eligible for funding, explain the application process, run through a mock site visit, and then review some project examples. Some of you may not be familiar with the department, so I want to start by explaining who we are. The Wake Soil and Water Conservation District is a non-regulatory Wake County government department. Under NC General Statute 139, conservation districts are organized as governmental subdivisions of the state, as well as independent political units. There are actually 96 local soil and water conservation districts across North Carolina. Our department works to protect and improve the county's natural resources while assisting private landowners in using conservation practices. In addition to providing technical assistance, financial assistance is also provided through state and federal cost share programs to support the implementation of best management practices to help protect the land and water of Wake County. The Wake Soil and Water Conservation District is governed by a 5-member board of supervisors. 3 of those supervisors are elected on the general ballot as nonpartisan candidates during the regular election, and the other 2 supervisors are appointed by the North Carolina Soil and Water Conservation Commission upon recommendation of the local district board of supervisors. We are a small department comprised of 6 full-time employees. We have our director, 3 natural resource conservationists who mostly handle the field work, 1 conservation specialist who does most of the administrative duties for the office, and we have 1 environmental educator who manages all of our EE programs. We also recently added a new part-time position that will be assisting the environmental educator with coordinating our Big Sweep program. For those of you that don't know what Big Sweep is, it's a citizen volunteer program that focuses on coordinating litter cleanups in streams, lakes, and wetlands of Wake County. So, what is CCAP? The Community Conservation Assistance Program is state funded and administered through local soil and water conservation districts across the state. It is a voluntary incentive-based program designed to improve water quality through the installation of BMPs on land not directly involved with agricultural production. The major point I want to emphasize here is that the program focuses on improving water quality on land not directly involved with ag. All of the other programs our department handles are specifically for agricultural producers. CCAP is a cost share program that covers 75% of cost up to $20,000 if awarded a contract. This means that the landowner is responsible for paying the other 25% and any additional cost if the project exceeds $20,000. This program exists to address rapid urbanization and to educate landowners on water quality and stormwater management. Eligible individuals are homeowners, businesses, schools, parks, and publicly owned lands with sites that have been developed for 3 or more years and released from sediment and erosion control permits. This is a list of the BMPs or best management practices that are eligible for CCAP. As you can see, it's a pretty extensive list, 17 practices, but there are a few practices that we see more commonly. Those are rain gardens or bioretention areas, backyard wetlands, and stream restorations. These practices are approved more frequently because they usually rank higher due to providing more water quality benefits. I'll explain the ranking process in more detail in a few slides, but it's something to keep in mind as we move forward through the presentation. Something also to note is that many of these practices require an engineered design, such as a stream restoration, but some practices can be designed by Wake Soil and Water District staff, like a grass swale or critical area planting. If your project is approved for CCAP funding, there are some responsibilities of the homeowner or customer. Homeowners are responsible for hiring the contractor for the project. There's also a maintenance period depending on the property type. For the most common situations, such as a single-family home, the maintenance period is 5 years. For businesses or public sites, such as a school or park, the maintenance period is 10 years. There's also a checkout system where we verify that the BMP was installed to program specifications, and those specifications vary depending on the type of practice that's being installed. To ensure that BMP is installed correctly by the contractor, our staff is typically on site during construction. The homeowner is also responsible for paying the contractor. It's important to note that the homeowner is paying the cost up front and will not be reimbursed the cost share rate until after the project is certified and signed off on. Now I'll explain the application process for CCAP. If you are interested in applying for this program, you would first want to contact our office. We would explain the CCAP program and discuss your objectives. If we believe you are potentially eligible for CCAP, we will schedule a site visit to see the property in person, which will help us determine project options and next steps. At this point, our staff would rank your project against other potential applicants. If your project ranks the highest, we would present a letter of support for the project to our Board of Supervisors for approval. After those steps are completed, we would then submit the letter of support along with an application for your project to the Division of Soil and Water Conservation, which is the State Department. The state's application period runs on an annual basis, and the application period typically opens in August or September and closes in October. So once the application period closes, applications are presented to the Soil and Water Conservation Commission. The commission is basically a 7-member board that provides oversight, rules, and policy for state soil and water conservation programs, and they determine the cost share allocations to conservation districts. So regional allocations are typically made in December and January. That's when we find out who gets funding. And only one allocation can be awarded to a county, and the maximum allocation is $20,000. So I mentioned the ranking process a little bit in the previous slides, but basically ranking of applications occurs on 2 levels. First, on the district level by our staff to determine the top ranking application from Wake County. This is done by using a standardized ranking spreadsheet that takes into consideration water quality benefits for the project. Then the top ranked project in our county is submitted to the division or commission for regional level ranking. North Carolina is broken into 3 different regions: East, Central, and West. So the application from Wake County is competing on the regional level against applicants from other Piedmont counties. The division ranking process takes a few more things into consideration as compared to our local ranking, and this slide and the next will break down those components. They look at whether the project will involve working with an impaired stream, which is based on the latest North Carolina 303D list of impaired and threatened waters. They look at the North Carolina Division of Water Resources surface water classification, and depending on the classification given, the application has different number of points. They also look at the impervious surface percent in the watershed, which is calculated using an online software tool called StreamStats. Projects located in areas with 11 to 20% impervious surface receive the most points for that ranking criteria. They take into consideration potential benefits of the project, such as the amount of soil loss that's occurring and potential nutrient savings for nitrogen and phosphorus. They also want to know if the project has any other funding partners, such as grants, and they look at local district priority. The division's ranking also takes into consideration if the proposed project can be designed by district staff, or if an engineer has to be created, or if an engineered design has to be created. They're also interested in knowing whether or not the project will provide education or outreach opportunities, if there are any potential issues with accessing the site or gaining local government or municipality approval for the work. And finally, they would want to see maps or photos of the site and proposed project. All of these ranking criteria are questions addressed within the state's application, which usually consists of around 25 questions. As you can see, the ranking process is very detailed. It's a competitive program due to the limited amount of funding, so they want to make sure that the projects they're approving provide the most water quality benefit and are most likely to be completed. I do want to note that the state is making some updates to CCAP, and the new ranking sheet has not been released for the upcoming program year, so there may be some changes to this that we're not aware of yet. So now that we've covered the details of the program, application, and ranking, I'll run through a mock site visit scenario. Say we first start, we receive a call from a homeowner that's having some type of issue on their property, and they want to know if we can assist in any way. Our staff would ask a few questions to get a better idea of the situation and determine if it's something that we can assist with. To determine this, we may pull up the property in Wake County iMaps to look at aerial images of the property. Using iMaps helps us get a better idea of the topographic features on the property, such as elevation or slope, and that helps us determine how water is flowing across the property. We also use iMaps to look at the soil type, and sometimes we pull up the plat of the property if there's a situation dealing with an easement. We also look to see whether the property is located within the unincorporated section of Wake County, or if it falls within a city municipality. Depending on the situation, if the property falls within a municipality, we may recommend contacting their municipality first if they haven't already. This is because most municipalities have their own departments that manage stormwater and provide technical assistance. Situations that may warrant this type of referral are if the landowner is having drainage issues occurring along like a city stormwater easement or drainage area, if there are blocked stormwater outlets or issues with utility sewer lines. Also, if the individual is located within the city limits of Raleigh and they're interested in installing like a stormwater BMP, we would also direct them to contact the city of Raleigh about the Raleigh Rainwater Rewards Program. This program is actually pretty similar to CCAP, but it's only available to City of Raleigh residents. So we actually had Tom Whaley, that program coordinator, present a few weeks ago as part of this Lunch and Learn series. So if you are a City of Raleigh resident interested in Raleigh Rainwater Rewards, I would encourage you to go back and watch that presentation. It can be a little difficult figuring out the best department or person to contact within municipalities. So we've listed them out right here for you. We have contacts for City of Raleigh, like I mentioned, Cary, Wake Forest, Fuquay Varina, Apex, and Morrisville. Most of these contacts are for their stormwater divisions, but you can see a few of them fall under engineering or floodplain management. The rest of the municipality contacts are listed here. There's Wendell, Zebulon, Holly Springs, Rollsville, Garner, and Knightdale. Moving back to the mock site visit scenario, if we determine the caller has a situation that we can assist with, or if we need to see the property in person to get a better idea of the situation, we would schedule a site visit. To prepare for the site visit, we usually print maps showing the topo data, blue line streams, utility lines, and soils. If applicable, we also print educational resources pertaining to the BMP that may address the caller's issue or concern. This information is helpful to have on hand during the site visit when we are evaluating the problem and talking to the landowner. If we determine the landowner may be eligible for CCAP, we will discuss this with them during the site visit and review program details further. Afterwards, we would follow up with the landowner by sending a technical assistance report with information that we reviewed during the site visit. If the individual was eligible for CCAP, we would then rank the potential project against other potential applicants that we received in the county. And if it ended up ranking the highest, we would take a letter of support to our Board of Supervisors for approval in late summer, early fall. Once the state application period opens, in again August or September, we would submit that application to the division. Allocations would then be announced by December or January. If the project was approved for funding, we would notify the landowner and they would be able to move forward with permitting and contracting for the project. Something I want to mention, and I'm not sure if I did earlier in the presentation, is there are time limits involved with CCAP contracts. If your project is approved for funding, you have 3 years from the start of the fiscal year to complete that project. This is usually sufficient amount of time, but if for some reason you couldn't install a practice within those 3 years, there are options to apply for an extension. So now I want to run through a few project examples of the most popular BMPs for this program. As you may remember from earlier in the presentation, the most common practices we see are stream restorations, rain gardens, or bioretention areas, and backyard wetlands. So the first project I will show you is a bioretention area project from Raleigh, North Carolina. So this is an aerial view of the property. The house is somewhat hidden in the trees, but it's located right here. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but the house is right here. And the lines in this picture are showing the slope of the area. As you can see, it kind of starts from 422, that's the elevation, and it decreases in slope towards the house to around 406, 408. That's around a 15-foot drop in elevation, where stormwater is running down this cul-de-sac, down the driveway to this property. We originally thought a backyard rain garden would work for this project. So in this picture, you can see the original rain garden design by our staff. The plans were to install the rain garden to the right of the house, just below the driveway. However, due to the large watershed size and the amount of impervious surface that had to be treated, this project ended up requiring a bioretention area. The photo here shows the updated design. You can see the swell is still planned to run along the side of the driveway and outlet into a 2-tiered bioretention area with wooden weirs to regulate water flow. This slide is showing the area flagged where the grass swell would be installed. They typically do this before construction to get an idea of where things are going to be placed for the BMP. And this photo is showing you the flags marking the area for the bioretention area. And this is a shot from during construction. Keep in mind that these projects usually involve some heavy machinery coming onto the property to complete earthwork. So it's just something to keep in mind, especially for accessing the property, making sure the machinery can get to where they're installing the BMP. And this is another shot during construction. There's just clearing the site for the bioretention area. And this picture is showing the planting design for the project. It contained a mix of 11 native wetland and ground cover species, and they're kind of spread out to create a mix of diversity around both of the bioretention cells. This is a picture showing the grass swell after installation. The vegetation has not established yet. They used Excelsior matting in the swell, which is a type of erosion control matting made of aspen wood fibers. Usually within like a couple months, you would start to see grass where they've seeded it start to come up within that grass swell. This picture is showing the end of the swell kind of leading into the upper end of the bioretention area. Again, these photos were taken not too long after construction, so you can't really see a lot of the vegetation because it hasn't established yet. And here is another photo kind of from a different view, looking up from the lower end of the bioretention area. You can see the two sections of the bioretention area and the wooden weirs that were installed. This best management practice did a great job of capturing stormwater that was running down the driveway, and it treated it before it was infiltrated into the soil and discharged further downhill. So now I'll run through an example of a backyard wetland and a critical area planting project that was also in Raleigh. This is a photo showing what the section of this landowner's yard looked like before installing the best management practice. The only vegetation that was in the yard was invasive Japanese stiltgrass. Something else to note in this picture is that there's a stream right behind these trees, just below the hill. It's a tributary that flows to Mine Creek. Here's a close-up photo of the same area showing the exposed ground and lack of vegetative cover. In the upper left corner, you can see a section of the stream. So basically, when it rains, water flowed quickly over this property and exposed soil and washed all the sediment directly into the stream. So this is a section of the yard just left to the area we just saw in the last photo. Again, there's little to no vegetation in this area. The landowners had tried to establish grass a few times, but due to the lack of topsoil and nutrients, they were not successful at establishing any type of ground cover. The backyard wetland was designed by our staff and did not require an engineer design. This is a design sheet showing an overview of the plans for the backyard wetland. You can see there was a grass swale planned to start at the end of the cul-de-sac and run down the right side of the house into the backyard wetland to kind of treat water before it entered that tributary. This is another sheet of the design, which shows the plans for the backyard wetland. It goes into a little more detail about the width and length and depth of the backyard wetland. It also shows a cross-section view of the wetland. And here's a list of plant species that would grow best in the backyard wetland. It's broken down by deep and shallow water plants, upland and drought-tolerant species. They didn't use all of these plant species for the project, but this is to show you the selection of plants they were choosing from. The goal was to use a mix of native species, some evergreen along with deciduous, and to select a few showy flowers to attract butterflies and dragonflies, which were important for mosquito predators. This is a photo from the construction phase where they were digging out the backyard wetland area. And this photo is taken a little bit farther out to give you a better idea of what the area looked like after it was cleared. This picture also shows the downspouts, the individuals kind of sitting in that backyard wetland. They're tying in the downspouts to the bottom of that wetland. The goal was to have all the house runoff released directly into that backyard wetland, so it was filtered and treated before it reached the tributary. This is an after shot showing the established ground cover, which was a shade-tolerant red and fine fescue in the lawn. This project was special because it was actually a trial for testing out compost blankets and socks on highly eroded slopes. Compost socks are essentially a mesh tube of composted materials used to slow water runoff, retain sediment, and control erosion. The ones used in this project were stuffed with compost and grass seed. You can actually see one in the lower left side of the photo with grass seed kind of coming out the top. Kind of looks like a chia seed pet. But due to their effectiveness, compost socks and blankets are now allowable cost share components for CCAP. This is a photo from a different angle showing another, like the compost sock in the backyard wetland. You can see is to the right. So essentially, you're seeing the slope of the backyard, and water would run down this hill along the fescue. It's being filtered out, and then it would hit this first compost sock, which would slow the water flow down, and then flow a little bit farther over the fescue, and then eventually into the backyard wetland to be treated. This is a view of the backyard wetland from up the hill, looking down towards the stream. On the upper edge, you can see some of the wetland plant species. Let's see if I can point them out right here. There's lizard's tail, and you have some arum and Christmas fern that were planted. And on the opposite side of the wetland, you can see another compost sock was installed, and that was to catch any excess water that wasn't slowed down by the original compost sock. So they kind of created like a 3-tiered system with those compost socks. So the last project I'll show you is from a stream restoration project in Apex, North Carolina. This project is located in the Jordan Lake Cape Fear River Basin, which was unique because most of the projects we receive are in the Neuse River Basin. An unnamed tributary ran through the backyard of this property, and the stream was experiencing some stream bank erosion resulting from the water moving through a deep curve or meander in the stream. This picture shows an aerial view of the area. The property, as you can see, it's marked in red right here, and then the blue polygon around it is showing the drainage area for the stream, which is basically the amount of land where water was collecting and draining into that body of water. So in this situation, there was a little over 80 acres contributing water to that stream. This urban and suburban area was fairly developed, but it didn't have a very high percentage of impervious surface, only about 20%, as you can see in the chart to the right. If you remember from the division ranking slide earlier, sites with impervious surface amounts of 11 to 20% received the most points in that category. This picture is showing you an idea of the erosion that was occurring along this section of the stream. You can see the deep bank cutout occurring under this tree. The only reason that bank was probably still there is because the tree's roots were holding it in place. The estimated soil loss for this stream was 3 tons per year. So that's a large amount of sediment entering this unnamed tributary to Beaver Creek. In the table to the upper right, you can see some of the stream conditions that were taken into consideration during the ranking process. Channel stability was poor, and stream bank erodibility was categorized as high. This picture shows the bank just to the right of the tree in the last slide. As you can see, the bank is eroding away, and that section behind the wooden boards is pretty steep. The landowners actually placed that wooden wall in the stream in hopes of slowing down the water before it hit that section of the bank. It helped some, but it's definitely not a long-term solution. This picture shows the opposite side of the stream. To orient you, you can see the tree with the exposed roots in the upper right corner of the photo. So this is kind of looking out from the house. This side of the stream looked pretty healthy. It had low banks and not really any erosion occurring. And then this is a photo from a little bit further downstream. Again, as you can see, it looks pretty healthy. Not really any erosion occurring, pretty low banks. So this tells us, usually in these projects for streams, we like to walk up and down the stream to see if there's any other erosion occurring. But in this case, it wasn't. So that tells us that most of the problem area is right behind the landowner's property in that small section. That was the only area that needed to be repaired. As I mentioned earlier, stream restorations are one of the practices that require an engineered design. The engineers that worked on this project were Dr. Greg Jennings and Jonathan Page from NC State. The picture is showing a design which consisted of laying the banks back on the south end and straightening out the meander by moving the stream channel slightly forward. This project did have an outreach and education component to it. We actually partnered with North Carolina Cooperative Extension to conduct a stream restoration workshop on site. 30 individuals registered for the workshop, and they were able to assist the project by installing plants along the stream bank. This type of workshop is a win-win for both the landowner and workshop attendees, because the workshop attendees installing the plants remove the cost of labor for that portion of the project. And the workshop attendees gain experience installing the plants and seeing how a project like this works. Individuals that typically attend these type of workshops are landscapers, engineers, students, or individuals that work in some capacity of stormwater management. This workshop also gave staff an opportunity to give a brief presentation about the CCAP program. If you'll bear with me a moment, I'd like to open a time-lapse video from this project. It shows kind of the beginning and end from construction to installation for the project. It's always great to see how projects like this come together. So let's see if it will play. There we go. So this is day one of the project. Basically, the engineers and contractors are just getting the area prepared. You see they have a couple of wooden stakes laid out to kind of mark the area. And then they have the machinery come in to kind of dig out that existing eroded slope. They do have a water pump set up that's taking the water from the right side and pumping it to the left so that this area is clear for that machinery to get in and kind of do all the earthwork. So they're marking the channel for him, so the guy moving all the earth knows where to set the channel, and he's taken some of the fill from that hill to level out the slopes. The goal is typically to have like a 4-to-1 slope along the bank. So they're just going back in, and now they're leveling out the other side of the bank, making sure that that's at a 4-to-1 slope as well. They're kind of moving some of that dirt around to the other side of the bank, just kind of double checking that the stream channel is in the correct location. And now you'll see they're putting some boulders along this lower end of the stream, and that's going to reinforce that bank because that's receiving the highest velocity of water. When you have a really high rain event, it's going to be hitting that bank. So they wanted to prevent any further erosion occurring, they put boulders down there and some erosion control matting to kind of secure that area of the stream. So that was just day one of the project, which is pretty impressive. They did all that in one day. And this is day two. They come out and they laid some straw down and then coir matting. Coir matting is basically an erosion control matting made of coconut fibers. It's biodegradable. And so they essentially seed the area, lay the straw down, and then lay that matting over top of it to kind of to seal off that whole area. And they use wooden stakes to secure it down. So at this point, I think they brought in some topsoil just to kind of add to that side of the bank. And this part of the video is just showing them spread that out. And they're kind of reinforcing that section of the bank as well, a little bit more, kind of making it level. And at this point, they're reseeding that area because all the grass was tore up. So they reseeded, laid down additional straw. And then after they complete that, they'll come back in with additional coir matting to secure the whole area. So yeah, you can see they seeded that top section as well and laid down some more straw. That's just to reestablish the grass that was torn up during construction. Yep, and right there, they're just laying down that coir matting and securing it with those wooden stakes. Now they're bringing in the plants, kind of getting ready for that plant workshop. Like I mentioned, there was an education outreach component for this project. So this is them just kind of getting prepared for that workshop. And at this point, everyone's showing up for the workshop. The homeowner was actually really nice of setting out a little spread of food and snacks for the attendees. He was really great to work with. Now they're just giving an overview of how the workshop's going to happen. Then after that overview, they just let the workshop attendees go and plant the plants. And you can see they get it done very quickly because the amount of people, they can install all those plants within a couple of hours. So that's an after shot of the complete project. That was, I think that's a really great video to kind of show you what it looks like from beginning to the end. So this is a photo showing you the stream 1 year after construction. The banks have filled in with fescue and native vegetation, and you can't even see any of the coir matting anymore. It looks really good. It's also really awesome when you can see a shot like this after construction to see the before and afterwards. So it makes a huge difference. So this project used multiple funding sources. It only received partial CCAP funding. This project occurred a little bit before we were doing regional ranking. It was when districts were actually allocated funding for CCAP. So it was a little bit different of a process. And so the funding that was requested for this project was a lot lower than what we typically request for our projects now. So it received CCAP funding for $2,437, but it also received a Duke Energy grant for $5,000. The total cost of this project was almost 10 grand. The stream section was about 58 linear feet, so that comes out to around $170 per square foot. Now keep in mind there were a few factors in play with the project to keep costs low, such as using NC State engineers, which they only charged $750, and I think that was just the insurance fee. So they donated the design for in-kind contribution. The cost of receiving a design from a private engineer at a company would be much higher, say around $5,000. The planting workshop also removed labor costs for installing the plants, so the landowner only had to pay for purchasing the plants and seed. Also, this project was completed back in 2016, so the price of construction and materials have increased some since then. A project like this nowadays could be double or triple the cost. The key points to take away from this project were that it had multiple funding sources from grant and in-kind contributions, such as the workshop and engineering design. Partnerships like this are very important for CCAP because it can significantly reduce the price of a project for the landowner. Also, having a landowner who is very invested and involved in the project and having the support from our Board of Supervisors also helps with having a successful project. And lastly, BMP effectiveness and cost is also important because we want to make sure projects are completed and that they are effective at solving the original issue. So that is all I have for you today. I hope the presentation gave you a good overview of CCAP and provided good examples of projects that can be completed through the program. At this time, I would like to open it up for Q&A. Abby, did we have any questions come through?
I haven't seen any yet. I'll check again and maybe give people a few minutes to catch up since we're a little bit of a lag.
Okay.
I don't see any questions
Okay.
on Facebook or YouTube.
You can always end early unless you have anything else that you want to add or.
I don't think so. I feel like you did a great job, and everyone now knows about Wake Soil and Water and what we do,
Okay.
how we can help them.
Okay. Well, if anyone has any additional questions, please feel free to contact us at Wake Soil and Water Conservation District. Our contact information is displayed here on the screen. If you're interested in watching any of the previous Lunch and Learn presentations, the recordings can be found on our website at wakegov.com/helplunch. Thank you again for attending today's